Hi, I'm Sonia Luna, CEO of Aviva Spectrum. My guest today, which I'm very excited about, is Elena Gomez. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you, Sonia. Thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here.
I'm excited having you on the show as well because I really think this interview is going to give our listeners some big takeaways, some lessons learned when you're in a growth organization. I know we're going to cover how to handle key employees and some of the retention strategies, also dealing with influx operations and how the accounting function moves away from this quote-unquote cost center to decision maker. So, Elena, let's get into it. You've been a great asset, a huge instrumental force, within Zendesk. Tell me, what's been the most exciting part about being part of a growth company?
Oh, gosh, it's funny that you say that because I don't know if I'd go back to a non-growth company anymore, but if I were to articulate, what's the most exciting part, I think it's really the opportunity and change that's going on around you. I think as in a growth company, what you often see is, what you thought you were doing for the next 6 months changes on a dime because you're growing so fast that you have to kind of keep up with that growth and take that opportunity that in a more stable company not growing as fast, you can sort of predict what your role may be for the next 6, 12, 18 months, whereas in a growth company, you may have your role defined, but the lines of your job description can be a little blurred, which gives you an opportunity to do more perhaps than what you may think you're going to do. I think the other really neat thing about working at a growth company is that, like I said, change is all around you. So that change creates opportunities, whether it's you're launching a new product or you're outpacing your growth, and now you need a controller, or now you need a CFO, as an example. Those are all opportunities that are presented in a growth company, and it's not specific to the role. It could be any role, but I think that happens a ton. And then often, particularly in sort of smaller growth companies, you do have a lot of access to senior management because everyone's trying to get to that end goal, trying to grow fast, and so there's no room for a lot of layers in the org. Usually there's more room for, I'll talk to the person who's the subject matter expert versus needing to go through a bunch of layers. So I have found in the growth companies I've been, it's been a really nice surprise to have access to executives, perhaps more than I would have at a more mature company.
So it sounds like not only expect the definition and the actual tactical things you do to change very quickly in a growth company, but it sounds like you're very willing to let go of those responsibilities to pivot and move into a different direction because now something else is a priority. But more importantly, I also kind of got from you is that dotted line to these subject matter experts that you're going to need if you do need to make that pivot or change into, let's say, a higher priority area within your role if you're a CFO or what have you in that executive position. Yeah, no,
I think that's a really good point, Sonia, in that in a growth company, you have to accept and embrace change. And that might mean that the structure that you might be used to will no longer be there for you, and that you as an employee and as a company need to be nimble because you're growing so fast that you don't really have time to pause and absorb always. And for some people, that can be very challenging. For others, they embrace it and love it. It's not for everyone, but I do think that, think about going to college and saying, this is my major, and then halfway through changing it. That's what it sort of feels like, which I think for most people is incredibly exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's and talking about exciting and dealing with more people, et cetera, but what HR strategies work best, in your opinion, in this type of environment?
It's a really good question. I think, for me, what I have found to be super effective, and I've seen this at many growth companies, is do not compromise on talent. So in particular in your key roles, you really have to make sure you have and are going after the strong talent and not, oftentimes what will happen is you're so busy, you've interviewed 10 people, and you just want to make that hire, right? And what you realize is you could do that, but if you're compromising or settling, if you will, that's a bad choice for the long term. So number one, don't compromise on talent and make sure that this is embedded in the culture of the company. Not just in your own department, but really across the company, the importance of getting and not compromising on talent. It's your single most important priority, hands down. And then in addition to not only attracting the best talent is retaining your best talent. And really that starts with identifying and being very structured about how do you even identify who your top talent is? How do you determine that, Joe is top talent and Bob is not top talent, and going through the rigor of doing that across the company and establishing sort of standard ways to evaluate who is top talent, who's an emerging high potential leader, and then, everyone else, and really making sure, okay, once you've identified those folks who you believe are either high potential or are currently top talent, have we put them in a position where we're going to really get the best of their talent? Are we enabling them to grow in their own career? And if not, being willing to take the risk to give those folks stretch assignments. And I think stretch assignments is a great retentive tool in addition to obviously certain things like bonuses and all that. But I think more often what you find is people really want and seek that challenge. And so to the extent you can identify your top talent and then give them stretch roles, I think that's incredibly fulfilling. And then I think having a strong culture of goals and having those goals really feed back up through the CEO and making sure everyone is aligned around those goals and then holding people accountable to them. People really appreciate when they have goals and they can measure themselves. It's like, weighing yourself on a scale, if you will. When you have a goal and you weigh yourself every day, if you look at your goals, it's really empowering to the employee to say, hey, I set out these goals, we created them jointly, and now I'm holding myself accountable to them. I think that's incredibly important. And then finally, of course, preserving the culture. I think this can't be underestimated. If you've got a strong culture in your company around everything from having fun, being inclusive, working hard, all those things that really make a culture rich, you want to preserve them, in particular in a growth company, because as you grow, you can see that culture become diluted. And as in a leadership team, what you really want to do is try to preserve the valuable elements of that culture.
Yeah, so it sounds like one, don't compromise on quality. It seems like no matter
never.
How frustrating it is. Yeah, and then once you get to that, the short list, you're finding like what's a really good match as well. It sounds like culture is key, not only to maintain it, but including everybody into that culture. And then I like the way you phrased stretch assignments. It's kind of, look, we hire the best and the brightest, let's say. Now, this role has, let's say, 20 specific tasks. What would be a stretch for my A players, right, that would drive them to excitement and get them to do A, B, or C, and therefore, bonuses, et cetera, or even just celebratory lunches, and I've seen people do, gift cards, et cetera, because the A players just want to get recognized that they went above and beyond too, and maybe it's not 100% based on money, but it sounds like also having a joint session of goals, kind of like back to the basics that we learned in college of goal setting and pacing yourself.
Absolutely.
And then the executives are not being the police, or more like coaching at that point, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So it's not like trying to hammer somebody, well, you haven't met this goal, and this. It's more of, okay, where's the gap? Is it, do you need more help here, more resources, more time, et cetera, rather than, creating it as like a penalty. And I found over and over again executives from both internal audit and also finance, goal settings is more of like, well, tell me what you're passionate about when you do walk in the door. Like what's it going to take you to be super happy here? What can I give you? And people really respond to that very well. That's what I've noticed over the years.
Absolutely. And one thing you mentioned, which I should reinforce, is recognition. Often recognition, as you said, doesn't need to come in the form of money. Often it's a recognition at a company meeting or, with the CEO or a simple email. And that is also incredibly valuable, and I think it's the least expensive of things that we can do as leaders is really say thank you and recognize those, especially in accounting and finance roles. Oftentimes you're sort of behind the scenes, and I know when I've had other colleagues at the company recognize my talent, it's like I've given them gold. And so really giving them opportunities to really shine even outside of the finance org is a great tool for you as a leader to give some, obviously well-deserved recognition at key times.
Well, Elena, as we wrap up this interview, I'm confident our listeners gained just a boatload of insight. I know that for sure, and especially how to deal with growth organizations. I want to say thank you again, Elena, for coming on our show today.
No, thank you, Sonia. It was my pleasure, and look forward to connecting again.
All right. This is Sonia Luna, CEO and founder of Aviva Spectrum, signing off.